Welcome to another episode of Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, where we focus on God, family, and country, helping you prepare for anything and everything the world might throw at you. We got your hosts in the house tonight, Shane, Scott, and myself, Paris. Super excited to be here with you. We got an exciting episode planned, and we're going to talk about some things that are going to be electrifying, or maybe de-electrifying. Anyways, I want to remind everybody to hit up our website at preppertalkradio.com and check out our resources that are there. Please join our email list. We're going to actually start doing some things. We're having some planning meetings here coming up where we're going to really kind of promote some stuff here in the coming months and years. So please get on that list so that you're ready to go when we are. Also, please check out Jace Medical. If you don't have they just posted on Facebook. It was the funniest thing. They said there's no pharmacy in the wild. So get your Jace Medical antibiotics and your daily medicines now. And so I thought that was a great situation. Go to Jace Medical, JASE medical.com. Check out their Jace Case, which is their antibiotics, and then add on maybe it's some ivermectin, maybe an EpiPen, but also they have Jace Daily for the daily medicines. There's a lot of people out there right now that are really concerned, like when things go wrong and the things we're going to talk about on this show happen, what are you going to do to continue to have your medicines? And Jace is the perfect option and the perfect opportunity for you to be able to have a store of those medicines. And go to use Prepper Talk and you'll get a $10 off discount. So that's great. Also, our good friend we had several episodes ago, Byron from Survival Frog. They've got a great sale going on for the rest of this year, for the holidays, for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. And by the time you listen to this, Black Friday will be over, but Christmas is coming up. So make sure that you head on over to survivalfrog.com. Yes, that's frog like the animal, survivalfrog.com. And you get 10%, about 10% off anything and everything you order over there with our code PrepperTalk. So use that code PrepperTalk and get 10% off your orders with our good friend Byron over at survivalfrog.com. So we're excited to share with you some of our thoughts and feelings about something that most leaders in military and a lot of people that are into prepping and prepared with and getting prepared are not saying a matter of if, but a matter of when. And that's EMPs. EMP stands for electromagnetic pulse. So the idea that something's going to happen, whether it's a bomb over the country and getting our grid down, or whether it's a solar flare, there's lots of different ways an EMP can hit. And so we just need to be prepared no matter what, or no matter which way it comes from us. I don't know if you remember a couple episodes ago, we had Paul Hutchinson on. He was the executive producer for Sound of Freedom. He mentioned in his comments that there's 18 infrastructures, major infrastructures, and our enemies know all of them, and 17 of them are connected to power. And so that's not good. When you have that much vulnerability, we need a stronger grid. We need a stronger power grid. And frankly, I don't think we're going to get one with a lot of the things that are going on, but we definitely can prepare ourselves for it. So that's what our subject is today: preparing for and being ready for EMPs.
Yeah, I think it's well known that our grid is old, it's vulnerable, and nothing that I've heard of is being done to harden the grid.
Correct.
In doing some of my research, I found that both Russia and China have hardened their grid. They're already hardened. They're already prepared for an EMP, whether, like you say, Paris, whether it's from the sun or whether it's nuclear. So it's really like everything else in the preparedness world. It's up to us to be prepared, right? Our government is not doing anything to our infrastructure to harden it, to update it. And from what I understand, it's not that difficult to do. Not that, $30 billion, but comparatively, that's pretty cheap, right? From what what the U.S. sent over to other countries, we could harden our grid. I wouldn't know how long it would take, but it could happen. But so we're just going to have to harden our own grids. And
that's the thing is, like, what is our own grid, and what do we need to harden? What can we do? And that's what we're going to cover today in this episode. It's like what we've done in Ukraine, the amounts of money we've funneled over there, we could have fixed our grid twice, 3 times, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, is we're not responsible for our citizens as a nation. Our government is not taking responsibility for the citizens that they are sworn oaths to take care of. And so you who's listening, you need to take an oath of yourself and say, hey, I'm going to take care of my family. And we're going to talk about some things to do. Like, The biggest issue after post EMP is it's going to take minimum 6 months for local grids to be put back together. Minimum. Now, if it takes out an entire grid, we have 3 in the United States. It takes out an entire grid. That means nationwide disruption. One grid will take down the whole nation because they are interconnected at one point. And loads will break things down. I mean, there's just so many things that will cause problems. And so we've got to make sure we ourselves, you, the listener, have done your due diligence and done your planning to be prepared for this.
Yeah,
it doesn't take much.
Yeah, if you think about really how reliant we are on electricity, I guess just take a minute and think about that around your home, what you could and what you can't do without electricity, right? And then start there, and then come up with a plan of how you can overcome that. I mean, this is quite a lengthy conversation. I got a lot to say, but I think we're all different. We're all going to have different situations. If I were at my property, my bug out location, and the power went out, it'd be an inconvenience, and that'd be it. But here, and okay, I'm overstating, definitely overstating there, right? Because it involves a lot more than just my own personal residence, right? When the power goes out, it involves the infrastructure. I mean, everything that we do every day, from traveling or transportation, communications, everything. But would we be fine? Yes. Here in the city, can't say that much. So look at your power consumption. What do you need power for? Figure out how to come up with a different power source for that, or do without. I mean, frankly, that's really what it
Something
goes down
a lot of people mistake too is that, well, they think, well, I got a gas heater, I should be fine. Or I got a gas furnace, water heater, should be fine. I have a gas stove, I should be fine. Well, more than likely, your gas appliance is lit by an electric lighter. So you got to have, you got to remember that electricity is still important for a lot of those gas appliances. And so you got to keep that in mind as well.
Cool. And your gas lines into your home are pressurized with electricity. Like, they don't just free flow and create their own pressure and power to get them to your home. Like, every city has to be pushing pressure on those systems to be able to keep the gas coming in. Otherwise, it'll dissipate and go bye-bye. And you'll experience that in the future when grids go down. It's not if, it's when. And it's funny because I've got cousins who have properties up in Idaho where they have their entire system off grid, and they have solar panels and they have a generator for the nighttime. They don't have backup batteries, which astounds me, but then they have these giant gas tanks, and they've got about a 2-year supply of gas on their property, which is fantastic. Because it's a pressurized system, self-pressurized system.
Propane.
Propane. Yeah.
Oh,
and it's like, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's and propane. I mean, all the studies I've read are at least 5 years before you start seeing it degrade. So you can store that stuff a long, long time. I've got tanks I'm using now on my barbecue that are 5 and 6 years old.
Yeah, and I've used the small cylinders. One that was over 40 years old.
Yeah, there you go.
And it worked fantastic. So yeah, so I think we need to first look at the threats. Obviously, the possibilities that are out there. Of course, coronal mass ejection. You look at what has happened in the past. We can learn from that, like the Carrington event in 1859. That what happened is it was just a very large solar flare. I don't remember the rating, but essentially the grid at the time was the telegraph system. Right? They didn't have the power grid. But what that did, it acted like a big antenna, and it basically collected the solar energy, and some of these telegraph lines caught on fire. Some of the telegraph stations caught on fire. So essentially, what we're looking at now is we have a much more extensive telegraph system right now through our power grid, right? And that it will act as one big antenna if we get an EMP, and whether it's a solar flare, or whether it's nuclear detonation, is that our grid will act as a big antenna and concentrate the frequencies if that's the right word, concentrate that energy in and direct it toward our homes, right?
Yeah.
So there's certain things we can do to protect ourselves from EMP, whether it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's still an EMP, it's still the same thing, maybe at different levels. Another thing we can look back to is there was a detonation in 1962, I think it was called the starfish, what did they call it, starfish, it was at some test that they detonated these a nuclear missile 250 miles above the surface.
Oh, you're talking about
Starfish
you're
Prime,
talking
I think
about
is what it's called. Starfish Prime.
Operation Fishbowl.
Well, I know about Starfish Prime, so maybe it has different names.
Starfish was one of the detonations within, I believe, Operation Fishbowl, if I remember right.
Oh, okay.
And those of you guys listening, you can make comments on these threads and let us know corrections, because I'm just going off of my memory. But yeah, they lit off a lot of nukes.
And Russia
right
did as
at
well.
The firmament.
180 miles, 250 miles.
What happens?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is those types of things, high level nukes, we as a country don't know the damage it could have on our current grid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's also interesting is we've got to worry about upper atmosphere nukes. We've got to worry about high altitude nukes. We've also got to worry about localized EMPs. Something as simple as a lightning bolt also creates a electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah.
Right. And that can fry your circuitry. Like Ben, we had him on a while ago talking about solar, and he had that happen to his house and lost one thing. He had a EMP Shield, which is awesome, because I've always wondered how well those work, and it saved everything that it was connected to. The only thing it didn't save was his well pump, and that wasn't connected to it.
Because it wasn't connected properly, right?
And
so essentially, an EMP Shield is a surge arrestor, a surge protector, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our breakers don't act as surge protectors. It's an entirely different device. But say you have a solar array, typically that's engineered into that system having surge arresters, surge protectors, lightning arresters in particular. So that's one thing you can do to protect your home. First thing I would say is most of the time we're going to have some advance notice of an EMP, whether it's a solar flare will have maybe up to 24 hours, probably less notice of a solar flare coming in. So the first thing that I would do is go turn off the breaker to my home, disconnect it from the grid, right? And then from there, go around my house, unplug everything I can in the house, unplug it, disconnect everything, take batteries out of your devices, and then, of course, we talk about Faraday cages, Faraday bags, a lot of different things we can do that way to protect electrical devices. But like you're saying, Scott, nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen, because the last test, as far as I know, was 1962 when there were carbureted vehicles. I don't think there was EFI. If there was, it wasn't very widely used in our vehicles, electronic fuel injection. And obviously we didn't have the electronics then that we do now. And so we really don't know what's going to happen. And
what's interesting is that study. So the 1962 event, so the DOD took 3 different sets of vehicles from different branches of the government to test on them under the promise that they wouldn't do any damage to it. And so they never did an electromagnetic pulse large enough to create any damage. So everything is theoretical as far as the U.S. understanding. Now, there are some leaked paperwork documents that I've seen floating around and heard of conversations from Russia, and they've done full destruction dampening tests and see what actually happens. And as you mentioned earlier, that's why they have hardened their grid, because they understand how dangerous an attack on a grid would be. And so is China. And it's like, okay, our 2 air quote largest enemies, the 2 groups that are the largest threat to the United States, know how to harden their systems and have prepared for that. And what are we doing?
Nothing.
So far, nothing.
We're still trying to figure out if we're a boy or a girl, right?
Now when you say, well, that's true. But when you say we, you're not talking about me. We're talking about as the country itself, the government, those who make the decisions about the grid and so forth. But we, as in three of us, as our community, right? We are doing. Well, I am doing everything I can.
Right. So the simplest thing you can do as a listener is, first of all, if you have a battery-powered devices, battery-powered radios, battery-powered AM/FM radio. And when I say radios, I'm talking about like your two-way walkie-talkies and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So your emergency communications plan and your network plan, as far as reconnecting to the radio and the community outside of you, right? Make sure you've created a small Faraday cage that you can put those in. Simplest way to do it, you can get those bags off of Amazon. You'll find them in our store, but they're EMP Faraday bags. You can also go get a metal garbage can with lid, and then you can insulate the inside, put cardboard down, and then put all your devices in there. Mm-hmm. Right? And if you have notification, you can take other stuff and put it in there as well. But at the very least, keep your emergency plan stuff in there. That way it's safe no matter what. And keep the batteries out. Keep the batteries in the container as well, but out of the pieces.
I was just going to say, another thing to think about when you're, especially if you have notice, is don't be driving, because if your car if your car goes out, you're going to be swerving around like a maniac, and so you might
stuck wherever you
might not survive that. So make sure that's that. Now I don't know all of the science behind electromagnetic pulses, but I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if you know, but if you mentioned, Shane, unplugging certain things, taking batteries out of your devices. If I take the battery in my car and undo it from will that save my car potentially? Or is it, because what I understand is that when an electromagnetic pulse hits, it's going to just amplify the currents that are already going through my devices and blow them up, like basically fry them.
I guess there's two ways.
No electricity, then there's nothing to amplify, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you're partly right there. I think there's two ways to go about looking at this. Is that the first way is that you look at sensitive electronics, right? When they're being manufactured, when they're being assembled, the workers wear grounding straps, whether on their hands or feet. They are grounded so that their movement doesn't create static electricity. That static electricity, just in the movement of a body of someone assembling a circuit board, can damage the ICs, the integrated circuits in those boards. So just the static electricity, because they are very sensitive, especially before they're assembled, but also on a PC board while they're assembled, static electricity can damage those as well. So when you get shipped say a motherboard for your computer, they come in a bag like this, right? Mm-hmm. They come in it's Mylar, but it's more than Mylar. It's more of a ESD bag, or protect, exactly. So when you're handling it, you've got to handle it carefully so you don't damage those PC boards. But they are more robust when they're in a system, like in a computer and so forth. But also think about how I don't think that the EMP actually amplifies anything. It's actually, if you look at the grid being an antenna, it's a collector. So the more is connected to that, the more it's going to collect, and more that frequency, that electromagnetic pulse is going to be amplified in that respect. So if you can disconnect from the grid, if you can have multiple layers isolating your electronics from the grid, so say like a power strip that's fused, or that has a protector, like a surge arrestor on that power strip, and then you have maybe the EMP shield. I honestly, I don't know how well they work. Obviously, there are examples that they do work, but having multiple layers of protection and isolation from the grid is going to be, from what I understand, this is all my own research.
A device all by itself, unplugged, could still survive an EMP.
I believe so. Yeah, and might as well put it in some kind of protection, like a Faraday bag, a garbage can, your microwave, maybe your oven that's shielded with metal. Solid metal works best rather than a mesh. But I mean, you look at the principle of how a microwave works, right? It's creating a frequency on the inside, but because of the wire mesh, none of that escapes, and it stays inside the microwave. So use it as a Faraday cage the opposite way, right? It's being shielded. You shield anything from the outside on the inside. But there's plenty of instructions online. You can find how to build a Faraday cage. So, and there are some specific things you need to do so that the electromagnetic pulse doesn't penetrate into that box or whatever you're using. It has to be fully metal contacted all the way around. It can't be any way for that wave to get in there. But I mean, who really knows? I've heard some people say that it might just stall your car for a minute and then you turn it back on, you're good to go. I mean, who really knows? Disconnecting the battery, yeah, I think that might help. I don't know for sure, but you're breaking the circuit. If you think about how circuits work, you have a positive, you negative, right? There's a ground, and all of those are required for the system to work properly. You disconnect those, and so that they're not collecting energy from the EMP. I suppose I would think that would give you additional chance of your devices surviving. Like, for example, solar panels. How are you going to protect the solar panels on your roof, right? You're going to build a big Faraday cage? No, I think in that case, I would disconnect them. Most systems are going to be installed with a disconnect, manual disconnect, lightning arresters. I would disconnect it. I maybe even climb up on my roof and disconnect them individually so that they're standalone. They're standing alone individually and not connected together as a big array that can collect electromagnetic pulse and potentially damage the panels. They're pretty robust, but if they're collecting all this energy, and you think about something that, like for example, something that generates heat, you apply electric current to it, like an electric stove. You apply current to it, and it generates heat. So that's what is happening within a system. And if whatever component in that system can't handle that heat that's generated, it's going to fail. So if you can disconnect those components, I think you could potentially survive. But then I don't know. I mean, this is totally hearsay, but
that's the interesting thing. Like most everything we're going to talk about with an EMP, again, is not full and complete data. So like if you hear something that's like, I have an EMP authority in the United States, and I'm like, I would question their credibility. I'd question their authority, because there's very few that actually study this and have studied this to a depth to be able to know exactly what's going to happen. And what we do know, what little we do know, here's what you need to take care of, right? The pre-planning. What is my plan for my family were an EMP to happen? And the nice thing about this is you do this and you're going to cover your bases for a lot of different scenarios. What am I going to do in case of a nuke? Because that could turn into an EMP as well. You think about it, that strategy. Okay, I've got food stored, I've got water stored, I've got first aid stored, I've got a communications plan, and none of this is a plan unless you've written it out, right? You can get the downloads on our website, preppertalkradio.com. Go to the resources. You can download some planning guides and things in there that'll help you with this. But if it's not written down, or you guys don't talk about it as a family or as a group, it's not a plan. It's a theory. So put that together. Make sure you've got a few weeks minimum in that safe room that you're going to use. If it's a nuke, there's some other things we'd have to talk about. But if it's an EMP, you want to have 90 days to a year plus of food, water filters. It's hard to have a year's supply of water, right? It takes up a lot of space. It's very heavy. But have water filters, because you can do rain catchment systems off the roof. There's a lot of different ways you can get moisture and water, and you can dig a well if you're in an area where you can do that, or find springs. There's resources for that. But have those things already set, right? And then if an EMP does happen, what if you're at work? What if you're at home? What if different parties of the family are in different places? What's your strategy if an EMP happens to make sure everyone gets home? Now, one thing to be well aware of is if vehicles do go down, the vehicles that are the most threatened by an EMP, electric cars. They are multiple cycles of circuits. And those things, goodbye. Combustion engine is great because all you have to do is reconnect the new source power, maybe swap out some breakers, and you can get it going again if an EMP does destroy those systems. But it's a lot more robust and anti-fragile, if you will, than an electric car in an EMP scenario. But if you do decide to go out, after the EMP goes off. Make sure you're using back roads. Make sure you're not trying to go down the highways and byways where everyone normally is driving, because there's going to be most likely a lot of stalled cars stuck in the way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Scott. What I was thinking is, I say this all the time, is if you're in a hurry, slow down. And that's absolutely the case if you're trying to bug out, trying to get out of the city, don't take the fast way, take the slow way, because everybody else is going to be taking the fast way and you're going to get stuck.
Yep.
So like you say, plan your route, know how to get out of the city, and ideally get out early. If you know it's coming and you've got time, don't bug out.
Have your routes
that's your plan.
memorized.
Yeah, that's
memorize your routes, and also print maps or have paper maps that you can identify alternate routes to be able to get to where you need to go. That's one of the most important things that nobody does.
Yeah. I want to just share something that you mentioned earlier, Scott. Kind of got me on a thought process here, that the electric car comment that you made earlier. And I just started thinking about every government entity that has any emergency preparedness plan, which they all do, has considered the ramifications of an EMP. My dad used to work for the city of Norfolk, which was it's pretty much one of the largest, if not the largest, naval base in the United States. So he was the IT guy, and he's like, yeah, we had all of this, all the experts came in and gave us all the rundown of everything. And it just kind of makes you say, when you think about all the different laws that are coming out right now about different cars that they want to have on the streets by 2025, 2030, and I don't know if you saw this, but recently they had somebody, I think it was either an act or somebody is trying to put it through where they're going to have kill switches on cars so that the authorities can stop your car if they need to. Well, that's an infringement on our rights for sure. But think about the different things that if they know EMP, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and yet they're still pushing for electric cars. That's really going to put the people in a position of dependency upon government agencies and other things, and put us in a place where we're not self-reliant, where we're not prepared, where we're not ready for what's coming. And so just think about that too, as you're, I think, as I drive down the freeway, I look at a Tesla and I'm like, man, that is a sexy car. But you gotta think practically about what's really going on. What's the agenda? Not to get too far down that rabbit hole, but just think about that for a minute. And I was just thinking about that when you said electric cars, like, why all these governments know, and they're still pushing for that. So let's just keep that in mind, by another evidence that we can't rely on others to keep us safe and get us prepared. We need to do it ourselves.
Think about the vehicles they use. How many cities are moving to natural gas vehicles?
They were for a while, yeah.
You know what? One of the biggest companies that uses as fuel, UPS. You know what they use as fuel? Natural gas. Almost all their vehicles are natural gas vehicles now. Why is the question? Well, number one, it's cheaper. But number two, less wear and tear on the vehicle, and there's a more ready local supply of it here in the United States. So I don't know what they do overseas, but right here in the U.S., they're almost all, like their entire network of vehicles is pretty much natural gas. I failed to see one that isn't, and that's awesome to me, because if a company that big is taking their own precautions, we should be learning from that.
No, that's true. And of course, another aspect of this, which we're just barely touching on, is obviously when the grid's down, what are you going to do for power? How are you going to get the power you need? Can we live on less? Absolutely, right? We're power hogs. Everything we do is, I got two monitors lit up here, just sucking down power, right? And I can't wait till the internet goes away. I don't have to do this every week, right? But yeah, what do we need for minimal amount of electricity, and how do we get it for ourselves? Of course, we talk a lot about power banks, about solar, battery banks, and solar generators, whatever you want to call them. I've got a EMP bag here for my solar generator, and you see this here. It's Lion Energy has this EMP bag made just for solar generators, and so quick and easy to throw it in there. And the other ones I've assembled, I'll be taking those apart I can do it pretty quickly. Hopefully, I'll have enough time between it when the EMP and then stick the components into some of these larger Faraday bags. And but figuring out now what you're going to need and then being ready for when that happens and have
power
those
outages are real, whether it's an
Yeah.
EMP, even an earthquake could cause a significant grid down.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of infrastructure that we have. I know one of the big scares or places that people are nervous about is the Hoover Dam. That lights up most of the West Coast. And so it's important to be able to realize that our infrastructure, especially with so many people. I mean, we've talked about this on other episodes, but we have an invasion coming in at our borders. It's interesting to me to hear some of the reports coming in about where they're telling these people to go. They're spreading them across the country and probably in key areas where, hey, isn't that an area where maybe there's a hub for the grid, or maybe it's like, where are these guys going and being sent? And so, there could be a coordinated attack. Even doesn't have to necessarily be a nuke. Let's say it's a coordinated attack where the hubs, like the stations, substations or whatnot, are all bombed at the same time, or they're just taken out at somehow. Or I don't know if you've heard, but I know this Klaus Schwab guy. He said that one of the great things that they're really looking forward to, or not looking forward to, that they're preparing for and planning for, is what do they call it? A cyber attack or whatever, so
cyber attacks.
They could send a virus through. I mean, we literally have our system running now, probably by computers, if not AI. And what if they just pop a little virus in there, goes in there and reboots some stuff and does something, and before you know it, our whole system is overtaken by a cyber attack. So there's cyber attacks too. That's a huge issue that could be a grid down a situation as well. That's just different. So many things to think about.
Well, we've seen in the past few years there have been attacks on power grids, in particular, power stations where transformers have been shot up, right? And so it was always thought that those were, practice events, right? As a trial event to see what would happen, shooting up and just taking out, I think it's 9 substations within nationwide, could potentially take down all 3 grids, like you say, Scott. And it's as few as 9 as many as 20 or so. So not very many. It's not going to take much, whether it's a cyber attack or whether it's an actual attack on infrastructure.
So we have 55 reported incidents in 2022, according to the NERC. The NERC is basically it's the North American electric grid, like not committee, but organization. So the Electrical Reliability Organization for the United States and Canada. But we have over 55 reported in the United States in 2022. Wow. Some of those were cyber attacks. Some of those were physical boots on the ground attacks. So it's very easy to say, okay, this could be a reality where we lose power. So what do you need? What do you need energy for? Well, if you have medical devices that require them, absolutely, right? Do you need it to run your PlayStation? No. Your Xbox? No.
Run your fridge for a couple of days, a week, while you're using up the food?
Yeah. And then after that, like, you've got to have alternate energy sources for fuel, for warmth, for cooking, right? That's what you need to really focus your plan around, is being able to go without as much as possible for as long as possible. And whoever can win at that game is the one that's going to get through all the crap that's coming and be standing on the other side and be like, dude, righteous. I made it. We made it. Our family got through this. And you can be of assistance to those around you. But if you don't take this seriously, if you don't start doing those things now, getting prepared now, looking at your scenario now, you're not going to get through even a short, like a 90-day window of gridlessness. You're not going to make it through.
I think if I was the enemy, and whether I was the enemy in terms of a country or a people, or even the enemy of all of it, I would say, let's go for the big areas. What are the biggest, most damaged possible areas? You might live in a small community and your power might end up being okay. But if they're big cities where all the resources come from to fund and feed and fulfill your needs as a small town are down, that's not good. I would say,
Yeah.
as a solution, I would say first look to get yourself squared away, just like the old adage on the airplane. Before if anything happens, when that mask comes down, put it on yourself first. You're not going to save anybody if you're dead. So get yourself prepared, figure out what you need, get your backups, get your resources, get your sources of power that you're going to be able to do, get your Faradays, get your things built up, your everything, and then reach out to your community. And even on a political level, start reaching out to your city and your representatives in your local city or town and say, hey, what are we doing in our city or town to be stronger? And then if you can or want to, take that to the state level. I mean, just there's a lot we can do to voice, and our voice matters and means something. So there's a lot of things we can do, even with the fact that we're struggling to get our grid hardened. We can sit and whine and complain about it, or we can actually reach out to our representatives and say, hey, and see if we can get some. We may not be able to finish it, but at least we can move the ball down the football field a little bit. If we get active and proactive about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, thanks again for listening. Hopefully this has inspired you to be prepared, to get ready for anything and everything that will come at you in terms of electric down, EMPs, cyber attacks, coronal mass ejections, whatever it is. Make sure that you're ready and prepared for whatever might happen coming down the road, because things will happen. Something will happen. So just be prepared. Get ready for it. You've been listening to Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, with your hosts, Scott, Shane, and Paris. We're super excited that you were with us for the last few minutes. And in the meantime, between now and the next show, stay ready, keep your head on a swivel, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you next week.